Okay, so we are live. Just getting a few things going here. Let me know how the sound is, as usual. It's the downsides of the one-man show here. I rely on you guys. Yeah, let me know how the sound is. What we'll be doing today is we'll be doing a review, or impressions, I guess, because I haven't spent that much time with it, of the Dunu Titan S, which is right here. Pardon the sounds in the background. I'll be comparing it to a number of other IEMs like the Moondrop Aria, as well as KXXX and the Dunu SA6, more for frequency response on those. The Aria I have here, unfortunately I didn't get a chance to actually measure the Aria yet, so that will be coming, but at the moment this is more about the Titan S. I see. Yeah, and then what we'll do after that is we'll do a Q&A session just in general, both about the Titan S, but also just any other questions you guys might have. Feel free to drop those in the chat there, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Yeah, basically the usual sort of Saturday live stream situation. I want to give a little bit more time to make sure that the audio is good, and then we will launch right in. So guys, let me know, is the audio okay? I think probably there's a little bit of a delay on the live stream, but we'll just have to deal with that as usual. And as just before we get going, I'll address some of the initial comments earlier on as well. I see here someone says the IEM market is oversaturated and unsustainable. Unsustainable, I assume you mean. It's becoming boring. Sort of. Yes and no. I mean, I think there's definitely an element of that. It's one of those things where it's like, it's similar to like when you go to the grocery store and there's just so many different options that it becomes overwhelming. It becomes difficult to actually figure out what sort of rises above the crowd, so to speak. But at the same time, I also think that the way that IEMs are going and the crazy value that there starts to be with IEMs these days, at all price points, because it's so competitive, is actually a good thing. A lot of manufacturers are really paying attention to how things should be tuned. They're paying much closer attention now to tuning than they have in the past. And I do think there's an element of, I've said this before, I think there's an element of sink or swim when it comes to manufacturers, paying attention to this stuff. And I know it's not all just about that, but being very meticulous about this matters a lot, matters more now than it used to because of the competition, right? So I don't think people can get away with just having good marketing anymore. Now things need to actually, we're even seeing a lot of marketing incorporate frequency response and graphs on the back of the box, what Moondrop does, what C Audio does. When I did the recent C Audio Yume Midnight review, live review, the box had the graph on the back there, which is awesome. So the more people pay attention to that stuff, the better, I think, and that's really going to help with allowing. It's really going to help with allowing certain things to rise above the rest. So it's only a good thing in my view. So yes, I get what you mean by there's just so many of them, but I think it's a matter of figuring out what the right ones are at a given price point, because in some ways IEMs kind of demonstrate this more than over-ear headphones, just because, as many people have said before, the manufacturer has to assume a lot more about your ear gain. That I think you can have multiple versions of good when it comes to IEMs, and that's easier. It's more obvious with IEMs. I don't want to say it's easier, but it's more obvious with IEMs that that's the case than with over-ear headphones. Just because of that, for example, the variation in ear gain and all those things become so much more salient with IEMs. And as an example, I personally find, as we'll see with this, the Titan S, I personally find most IEMs to be a little too forward around like 3K, like the strongest part of the ear gain there, the canal resonance point. So for me, that ends up being something that I always look for something a little more relaxed there than what I think other people do. Because other people I think are totally fine with more gain there. So yeah, that's not something that I think would be as obvious with over-ear headphones. Okay, so it sounds like the audio is good. We'll do the Q&A after we do the impressions here, as I mentioned. Let's just dive right into the Dunu Titan S. And I'll begin with the packaging, which is very similar to the packaging that they had before on their DK. I don't want to say the DK3000, but the DK2000 I think had the same case, and it's a totally fine case. It's sort of a leather-ish type thing with a decently spacious thing on the pocket on the inside. There's also this little inside pocket there. I'm not sure if you can see this, right? That shows up, but I really like this case, and I like it better than most of those round cases, just because this one, like in every situation you're going to throw it into a backpack, but with this one it feels like it's actually easier to do because it's not like it sort of compresses a little bit, and it's very thin. So I like this design better, and I can even just slide it into a jacket pocket and it doesn't like bounce around and crash into anything, which is nice. So I'm a big fan of these. I like their other style cases as well, but this one I think is solid and nicer actually than what you get with the case for the Moondrop Aria. And it's a personal preference thing, of course. But also the IEMs are right here. Let me just see if I can get it to focus on that. There you go. Right. So they have a very unique and interesting look to them. And there is an element of what Dunu does here with not just these IEMs, but you can see sort of a consistent theme for Dunu products, that they do a really good job of ergonomics. They do a great job of build. They do a good job with the cable, right? This cable is actually one of the better cables for a $80 IEM. One of the best cables for an IEM at this price. And they also do a really good job of the packaging. So all the rest of all the sort of like peripheral non-sound related stuff, Dunu consistently does an amazing job. And you'll notice here that this is kind of like a unique, as I mentioned, a unique design to the shell. But first, I suppose the most obvious thing is this sort of venting piece here. Now keep in mind, these are dynamic driver IEMs, right? But at first, when I saw this, I was like, that's a weird looking IEM. And I was kind of like a bit skeptical about how they would fit. But they're very small. And the fit on these is outstanding. Like, I can't think, and maybe it's not going to be like this for everybody, but for me, this is possibly the best fitting IEM that I've come across. Which is weird because, again, it doesn't look like it would be a particularly ergonomic shape for, if you think about the shape of the ear that it's supposed to go into. But I really like this for comfort. And again, the build does feel pretty solid. Comparing it here quickly against the Moondrop Aria, I do feel that the build of the Titan S is better. Now, the Aria is also quite comfortable. But people have talked about the paint chipping off on this stuff, and I don't think that's something you're going to have to worry about with the Titan S. As a sort of brushed finish going on here with the Dunu logo or Dunu name, and then there is this sort of venting piece here which you don't see on other IEMs. I didn't have any issues with like sound leaking in and out as much, but that might be something to consider, but I didn't have that much of an issue with it. So, I'm thinking of like the use case situations for this, like again, for me, which is almost always walking around, using it portably, taking it, outside, that kind of thing. I didn't have any problems with any of this. Now, same thing with the cable and the ergonomics. It's not microphonic or anything like that. At least I didn't find it to be. And it doesn't get tangled, and it doesn't like pull on anything. It doesn't get caught on anything, which is also better than what you get on the Moondrop Aria, which has this more kind of stiffer braided style cable here, which as much as I actually kind of like this cable. It feels pretty sturdy, like it's not going to break. It does also tangle a little bit more because it keeps its shape. It's a little stiffer. Yeah, that's definitely a plus for the Titan S. The cable here, so it's the usual sort of 2-pin style connector, but interestingly, they have like the end of the 2-pin piece here connects. There's like this sort of seamless connection with the back of the housing, right? So I don't really, I don't think you would really need to or have any reason to swap the cable out to something else because this is already ergonomically good. Yeah, we'll get to the frequency response here in a second. So as far as the intangibles, or the tangibles, I guess, the build, the ergonomics, the accessories, the comfort, it's all outstanding on this. And so again, Dunu nails it with that. Now let's talk about the sound quality. And this is where I'm going to throw the graphs up on the screen here. And I'm going to throw like a bunch because like with IEMs, okay, so we have to go into this. Let me first back up and say that the measurements that I've done of this IEM are done on the Gross RAO402 coupler, which is the official Gross coupler, the most recent one, but, or at least the for the last few years. But what it does is, if you guys are familiar with the coupler resonances on like what Crin commonly uses, and those Taobao couplers that you see commonly used, even though Crin also has the RAO402, but the most common couplers to use are actually 0045 equivalents, which have a coupler resonance there in the treble. And what this coupler does that I'm using is it dampens that, or yeah, it basically reduces that resonance. Now at the same time, because it has that resonance damping going on, it has the effect of reducing the treble. So what you're going to see in this graph here is you're going to see a subdued treble, but that's not actually how the IEM measures. It's just to get rid of that coupler resonance, that peak that ordinarily shows up there on the other couplers. So just keep that in mind, that this is not comparable with 0045 equivalent measurements. This is only comparable with other, official Gross RAO402 coupler measurements. Without further ado, let me just throw that up on the screen here. Right, so this is, and I'm going to show you a couple things here. So this is the Titan S with the foam tips, and I found, okay, so the reason why the foam tips are interesting is because it allows for a different type of, the vent is purely cosmetic. Okay, that's probably why. That explains why I didn't have any issues. That's interesting. But anyways, so with the foam tips, I found that I actually think that a lot of this frequency response for the treble and the upper mids is going to be dependent on the fit. I see someone say vent help reduce pressure and mitigate high and low pressure fatigue. Also gave better separation. All right, so I'm getting mixed messages here. Metal says that the vent is purely cosmetic, and someone says that it's not. But we can get to the bottom of that. But in practice, right, this is what I'm saying. In practice, it doesn't have, it's not like an open back or anything, right? Like there's no, I don't notice any meaningful leaking going on, like for sound coming out or in. Not more than other IEMs. So yeah, I didn't have issues there. Maybe somebody else has a different experience, but for my use case, I didn't have problems there. In the 64, yeah, that's totally different. Yeah. So okay, well, I'm running with the vent being a cosmetic thing, but I think it looks cool. Anyways, so getting back to the frequency response here, this is the foam one with the foam tips, and the reason why I'm showing you guys this is I'm also going to throw up with the silicon tips, which you can see definitely changes the treble here. Now, the thing with the foam tips that you're gonna have to keep in mind is that this is gonna be like highly dependent on the individual, because it is going to be different depending on the fit. But I think it's worth noting that if you find that there's not enough mid treble for you, and maybe it's a bit too shouty, this might be something to consider. The foam tips might be something to consider. But the other thing with this is that I'm going to do a comparison here with some other IEMs. If you compare this to like the Moondrop KXXX, let me just go back to the foam ones here. You can see that basically you have with the foam tips, it's a very similar response overall, just that the KXXX is a little bit warmer, right? So you have a little bit more bass in the KXXX, not as much ear gain here, and then also less treble, right? So, we can talk about the Titan S being a little bit shouty, and I think it is. It's not much shouty. It's just a little bit, right? Because I think we have to be very careful when we describe this as shouty, because it's not just shout isn't just about the level here in the upper mids. It's about the relationship between this level and the rest of the harmonics above it, right? And with the Titan S, you do have a little bit more treble in the mid treble and the upper treble than you do on some of these other IEMs. So even though it is a little bit more forward here in the upper mids, which is where kind of that shoutiness comes through, that is balanced out by the treble, because there is a little bit more treble presence. Now, I think with my initial assessment of the sound when I was listening to it over the last weekend, was that while it is like, again, I'm going to say like 2 to 3 dB too much for me in this upper mid-range region, because again, for me, as I mentioned, I prefer tunings like what you get with the Dunu SA6 or the 64 Audio U12T. Obviously, those are much more expensive IEMs, but they have a much more relaxed presentation for this particular region. And for me, I know that's where my ear canal amplifies. Like, I was even doing like some test tones, like generating test tones. You can't hear this, but you can actually make it so that, the frequency tracks the cursor. And I found that, yeah, it's definitely louder for me on most IEMs in this region. And also somewhere around like 6.1. But yeah, mostly it's the ear gain region. So I find most IEMs shouty in this region, including the KXXX, right? And that's not because of this being like, I would say the KXXX's frequency response is pretty normal, right? Like, yeah, it's a little bass boosted maybe, but like pretty darn normal. And that's because the balance between upper mids and treble is decent. Now, there is also an area where, let me back up. So the KXXX obviously is more expensive, and I think the more realistic comparison is with the Moondrop Aria. Now, as I mentioned, I don't have the graph of the Aria yet, but that will come when I do an evaluation of the Aria, like with the post and everything, with the measurements. But subjectively, just listening to them, the Aria doesn't sound as shouty here in the upper mids. However, the Titan S is also better in the treble. Specifically, the Titan S, as much as the treble is a little more forward than the Moondrop Aria, the Titan S has a more balanced treble presentation. And it also, I think my main complaint with the Moondrop Aria, and in fact, all of those Moondrop Dynamic Driver IEMs, like the KXXS and Starfield as well, is that for cymbal hits and percussive hits, there is presence up there, and it's not like it's rolled off in any way. It's just not that, it's not particularly uneven, and I find that it just tends to fall apart a little bit. Like the treble, like the cymbal hits and percussive hits tend to fall apart a little bit on the Moondrop Dynamic Driver IEMs, and with the Titan S, it doesn't. Right, so that's the key difference, right? On the Titan S, it's a little more shouty in the upper mids. Yes, I think that's the only again, for me, it's a little bit shouty, but the treble is better because it doesn't fall apart. It is a little bit more, cohesive and a little bit smoother of a treble presentation, and also a little bit more forward of a treble presentation, meaning that the fact that this level is high is less significant. Now, again, for me, I do EQ this. I drop 3K ish by about 2.5 dB, something like that. and I use the Q-Lix 5K, and that works just fine. But the same is true for the Moondrop variations. The same is true for basically all of the IEMs that have a tonally correct, let's call it, sound signature in the upper mids. I find them all typically shouty, and I reduce the upper mids by about 2 dB on all of them. I just reduce it a little bit more on the Titan S. Now, so that's the frequency response. Let me just show you here in relation to the SA6, which, as I mentioned, that's the frequency response that I personally prefer. This is a smooth version of the SA6, and you can see, it's definitely more analytic here in the upper mids, more clinical, and for me, the SA6 is the frequency response that sounds more versatile and agreeable. Obviously, way more expensive. And again, I think that's it for the moment. I don't think I have anything else. Oh yeah, this is the Audio Clairvoyance, right? So again, you can see it's a little more relaxed there for me, quite a bit more relaxed for me, but also bassier, right? So you get. Let's go back to the back to the KXXX. So as I mentioned, it's a very similar kind of sound to the Moondrop Aria KXXX, but not as warm, right? Like a little bit less bassy, and a little bit, let's say, more counterclockwise tilted relative to those. And I think it works really, really well. Like, again, I think I commented on Twitter when I first heard it, I thought, wow, the treble is so well balanced with this, but it is more, treble focused, right? Like upper mids and treble focused overall. So that's basically it for the frequency response. Let me just switch back over. But now let's talk about the intangibles here. The things that are not easily available in frequency response. Again, probably more so with IEMs than others. And actually, this is where I'm gonna talk about the bass, because it does have a slight bass boost on the Titan S as well. Not to the same degree as the Moondrop Aria, but it is still there. But what I found when I was comparing them back and forth is that the Titan S I find to be more technically impressive in the bass. I don't know if Metal found the same thing, but like I found the Titan S's bass, while not as high in level, to be more, I don't know, contrasty, more impactful. So, as much as I prefer a more relaxed tuning in the upper mids, I think that the Dunu Titan S's bass is right on point. It's very solid. Oh, it's focusing on my face again. And so for let's call it a slightly more analytic presentation with good bass, like good, not high level bass, but good quality bass, the Titan S nails it in my view. It's fantastic. So really, I think that's basically it for the impressions in comparison with the Moondrop dynamic driver IEMs. I think its biggest competitor is the Moondrop Aria, and really I think that's what you're looking at with these two. They're both really good value. They're both priced very aggressively, and I think if you want a little bit more of an analytic presentation with really good technicalities, the Titan S would be the way to go. If you want something a little bit warmer with a little bit more, let's call it a stronger bass shelf, then the Moondrop Aria is going to be the way to go. And I think that the biggest trade-off there for balance is, upper mid. Like I think the consequence there is like an upper mid forwardness on the Titan S versus better treble balance on the Titan S compared to the Moondrop Aria, right? Where the Aria is a little bit more versatile in the upper mids, and overall, actually, the Aria's tuning is almost exactly what I want. Just that the treble unevenness there loses a little bit of focus for cymbal hits and percussive hits and things like that. So in my view, it really just depends on which qualities you're after. And I think the key thing here, let's assume you're not going to EQ these, because I think most people don't EQ IEMs because they're not, well, unless they're using this, which everybody should use. They're probably not going to be EQing IEMs. And so if that's the case for you, I think the biggest consideration here is how you're going to handle the elevated ear gain level at 3K. That's, I think, the biggest thing, right? If you're okay with a more forward presentation for the upper mids, the Titan S is going to be solid. If you are not okay with that, I think you're going to be better suited with the Moondrop Aria. As much as the treble trade-offs in the Aria favor the Titan S, as do the bass quality or punchiness, I don't know what to call that. I do think the tuning on the Aria is the one that is a little more versatile. Okay, that's it for the impressions of the Dunu Titan S. Of course, I recommend it. This is like ridiculous value at this point. Is it a Moondrop Aria killer? I think no. I think it's Moondrop Aria adjacent. It does certain things better, but also certain things not as good. And that's really, it's just like here's an alternative, right? Depending on the things that you value. For me, yes, I would take the Titan S over the Aria because I do use the Q2X 5K, and I can very easily just drop 3K by about, or 3.1K by about 2.5 dB, and it's right in line with how I like it. So extremely good value, I would say, for both of these. But yeah, of course, with the Titan S. Okay. So let's do some Q&A now. If you asked questions before and I missed them, feel free to ask them again, and I will do my best to get to them. I am just going to read backwards and see if there's any comments on the Titan S that I missed. Yeah, you guys are talking about the vent. I think, as Metal pointed out, thanks for doing that, the vent is purely cosmetic. I didn't actually ask Tom that, so I'm glad you did. I'm glad Tom confirmed that. But I think they look cool, so yeah. Tips absolutely affect the sound. They cause a different insertion depth. Different materials are just like switching between leather and suede, full-sized pads. Yeah. You're talking about for the tips. Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean when I found this to be both the case both on the rig, but also subjectively, right? When I was using the IMs with the foam tips, I found that the whole presentation just shifted. It just changed, and I can see a reason to go for either one of them, because I actually think that with the silicone tips you get, like, that technical performance comes through a little bit better. Maybe that's just me, but I found that, you do lose a little bit when you go to the foam tips, at least the ones that I went with. Pardon me. But yeah, I think, it's worth playing around with that. I will say I did try the Final Audio Type E or whatever tips those are, the ones that have the kind of gray little thing on the inside, and those do change the frequency response probably more than others do, and I was trying to see if it would reduce the upper mids, and unfortunately it didn't. So I would not, those did not really benefit the Titan S in any meaningful way. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be a question mark as far as the insertion depth is concerned, and getting the fit, because again, it's interacting when you're putting the IEM in your ear. It's interacting with the most significant part of the gain of the ear gain that's going on there. So that is basically, that's where everything is going to be determined by that. So yeah, that's probably the first thing that I would consider. Okay, let's see. Okay, first question ever. I was wondering if you, Clinical, or Precog have ever studied the subjective and objective effects of ear tips on IEMs. Is there a difference, or is it only fit? I think it's more than just fit, but I think fit is so like, that's exactly what we were just talking about. I think fit is the biggest factor, but I do think there is a difference. Like, the way that you can kind of tell with this is, if you use the Comply foam tips, they often have the best fit, but at the same time they also cause everything to sound a little bit mushy. And so I think a lot of that has to do with the material that's being used and the fact that it's either more porous or less porous, depending on which one you're talking about. The other ones are definitely that affect the sound the most significantly with IEMs, irrespective of fit, are those final Type E tips. they definitely have a bigger impact. So, you know, the answer there is it's mostly fit, but not entirely, not exhaustively fit. Moondrop bass is really slow to respond by comparison to the Titan. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I mean. It's not as lively, I find. But yeah, SA6 is the GOAT. Yep. Corinne. Oh wait, is my camera overheating? No, I thought I'd fixed that problem. Oh, I know what the problem is. All right, I'm sorry, guys. Let me just throw up the graph so you can look at it again while I fix this. I do know what the problem is on my my camera. And it shouldn't do this, I promise. We'll fix it here in a second. Talk amongst yourselves while I fix this, because I do have the answer. And it won't happen again. Inevitably, it will happen again. It's because I was shooting in 4K rather than 1080p. That's the problem. And, you know, for a live stream, there's no sense in doing, you know. All right. There we go. And I think we're back. We are back. Should be good. Oh, come on, cancel it. There we go. Okay. We're good. Sorry about that. You hate the foam tips for sound. Yeah, exactly. Dunu X Resolve should happen before Kryn beats you to the punch. I would love to. I would love to do a Dunu collab, because Dunu is a company that is one of the most forward-thinking and best companies to interact with. And, you know, so for example, they take feedback very, very well. They take it as constructive. I made a post on Twitter a while ago about the whole, you know, campfire audio drama that was going on, and I think some people didn't quite understand what was happening because of the wording of that post. But what I mentioned was that there are some companies who are very forward thinking when it comes to you know, engaging with reviewers and taking feedback critically and seriously, and then there are companies that aren't. They're not very good at that. And Dunu is probably the best. They are very in tune with the community. They pay attention to what people are talking about, what people want, and you know, they take the feedback seriously. So, you know, for that reason alone, I would love to, you know, do some sort of collaboration with Dunu. They're probably at the top of my list for, you know, potential IEM collabs. Oh, they're definitely at the top of my list for that. The thing is, though, like, you know, I think the main thing with those collabs is we'd have to figure out like all the rest of it, like the logistics of that and how that would work. You know, whether headphones.com would be an exclusive, etc. But yeah, I would love to do it. I would be absolutely game to do it. I think what I would end up doing is like I would do like an SA6 with a little more treble extension or something like that. That would be like, you know, exactly my kind of thing. Although the problem is, though, that the SA6 is already so amazing, right? So maybe there would be something else that would be, I don't know. Like if I were to do a collab, the thing I would want to do something that is in the more like, you know, like high value segment, like, I don't know, like $250 to $350, and it's very competitive there, right? So it would have to be really, really, really good. But that's because that's the most interesting thing. Like what I find most interesting in not just IEMs but in headphones and audio in general is when products come out like the Titan S, for example, or the Moondrop Aria, or the Blessing 2 and Blessing 2 Dusk, or in the headphones the Hi-Fi Man Sundara 2020. You know, those types of products that are extremely aggressive in their pricing, and they provide that sort of like, you know, baseline benchmark for people. That's AKG K371. That's the type of stuff that I love, and if I were to do a collab, I'd want it to be one of those products. So at the same time, it would be very interesting to do something in the high end as well. But it's more fun when it can be enjoyed by more people, right? So. Kind of surprised a lot of people like Crin's EQ for the Kern. I don't know what his EQ is, but for me, there are two issues with the Kern. Is the Kern the Zex Pro? I think it's the Zex Pro, yeah. The treble is bad. I'm just gonna say it. But the other is that it is not particularly technical at all. And I think, Crin would probably say the same thing. And it's more that, the rest of the tonal balance is much better than what you would typically get at that price point, I think. The one thing though is that I haven't heard that CRA CCA thing that everybody keeps talking about, and that's even less expensive as far as I understand. So, in some ways it's like, I don't know if the Kern is really that great value, given some of the other stuff that's there now at that price. You like an in-between between HD600 and Sundara. So something more lively than your HD600, more treble energy. Okay. So that's weird that you say that, because the Sundara is not boosted in the treble. Like, any people who say the Sundara is boosted in the treble, maybe for them, right? But if you look at like the graph, it's just right on the money. It's about as neutral as it gets. I think I saw some Sundara measurements that had like a peak at around 6K or something like that, but none of the units that I evaluated was that an issue, or maybe it was like it's somewhere around there, but that's the only thing I could think of. So Sundara and HD600 are pretty darn, like, there's nothing. If you want something more, like, has more treble than an HD600, the first thing I would do is replace the pads on your HD600. The other thing I think that you might be that you have to consider there is that those Sennheisers, they have a little bit more body in the upper bass, because less so on the 600, more so on the 650, but that might be where you're hearing some of that. But yeah, I don't think that there's that much distance in the treble between the 600 and the Sundara. So apart from that, I don't know, like, I hesitate to say you could go for a Focal LX. Those are more expensive, but that's not really, like, I would say technically the Sundara is more neutral than a Focal LX, right? The LX has that forward mid-range character slightly. So, but yeah, I mean, it is still a little bit, I don't know, exciting in the treble. But which is, I mean, this is basically what I'm wearing right now is like Alex adjacent, because this is an Alere with Utopia pads. I think the Alex is more like the Alere with the clear pads. I think that's more similar. So I'll have to do that comparison with those clear pads and see, what the effects of the Utopia pads here. Rob, thank you. As always. I'm installing a Lokius between the iFi IDSD Pro DAC and name Atom headphone amp. Is it okay to use the dual XLR to dual RCA cable from the Lokius to the name, or should I just use the RCA on both ends? Okay, dual XLR to dual RCA. I'm not sure what that is. I'm sorry, I don't have the Lokius, right? So like I have no chance of evaluating that. I don't know if I can really answer this question. That might be something to ask Shit Audio, just because you don't want to be blowing things up, right? I would ask Shit Audio before doing that. But does the name have XLR inputs or no? Because if it doesn't have XLR inputs, then I would just go RCA to RCA. But if it does have XLR inputs, just use XLR. There's nothing good with reviewer collabs. Better to leave it to the professionals. The problem is the problem with that statement is that yes, there are things that engineers know and can do that reviewers can't. That reviewers don't have the experience with, but reviewers are different from engineers in that reviewers have the full, not in all cases, but ideally, will have the full landscape of products out there that they've evaluated. So they better actually understand where a given product fits in relation to everything else, oftentimes more so than the engineers who are developing those products. The other thing to keep in mind is that engineers are often developing for specific parameters, not necessarily knowing what that's supposed to sound like. And what do I mean by this? Well, so for example, engineers might be indexing specifically for extremely low harmonic distortion, but the problem with that is that that's, and they might achieve it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually going to sound good, right? And as we've seen so many times with, well, again, lots of IEMs for starters, because there's IEMs out there that are tuned like absolute madness. And like, if you've listened to the Honeydew or the Satsuma, you know what I'm talking about. But also, with over-ear headphones as well, like I constantly come across headphones that are tuned with 0 ear gain, and they think, oh yeah, it should just be flat, right? We should make it flat. But that completely misunderstands, the fact that humans have ears, right? So, I run into this kind of stuff all the time, where it's like, the engineers might know how to make a driver and make a headphone and make things work and engineer for these specific parameters, but they're not, necessarily going to be the best person to know what stuff's supposed to sound like. And I think that's really where reviewers who have that full experience with, like, the wide range of equipment, like Kryn, who's doing collabs, that's really where the value of the reviewers comes in. It allows them to make something with, again, not in all cases, but ideally, it allows them to make something that is somewhat of an addition to what the manufacturer, what the engineer might be working on, right? So it's basically like, here's another perspective from somebody who actually is a professional, who has experience with more stuff than the engineer could possibly have experience with. I think that matters. I think that's super valuable, and I think the more collabs that we get, the better. Obviously I haven't done any, but like, it's not, so I'm not just saying that, because I'm a reviewer. I'm saying that, like, of the IEMs that I've evaluated that have been collabs, you can see the benefit there, right? And you can see the value of that additional perspective. Again, not in all cases, but like a great example would be the Moondrop Blessing 2 versus the Blessing 2 Dusk, right? There are people who actually prefer the Blessing 2. Like, actually, I know Taryn prefers the Blessing 2. But the benefit of that alternative perspective that Kryn provided with the Blessing 2 Dusk is that now you have something that doesn't have as much of that 6K peak. That, if anybody was bothered by that, they'd be like, oh, here's something that is a little bit more versatile or smooth, in that region. And I think that's valuable. All right, let's move on. Compared with Starfield, yeah, I did that comparison a little bit. It's Starfield and KXXS are tuned identically. So, Dunu Resolve Luna Pro, yeah, I would be super into that. That would be, I know that's more expensive, but like I would love that. But actually, I have spoken with Dunu about that, not to do a collab or anything on that, but like the trick with that, or the difficulty with that, is that as soon as you start doing, as soon as you start dialing in the tuning with that stuff, you lose a lot of the dynamics and the technical character there. At least, that was the description that was given. But you do see the trickle down effect of that platform, with other their other results, like the Zen Pro, I think, for example, that was the more recent one, the Eclipse platform there. And I just think I would love to see, and maybe it's not possible, but I would love to see, another thing developed with that beryllium driver. Right, that would be pretty cool. I've also had it described to me that like it's apparently much more difficult to tune dynamic driver IEMs, like single dynamic driver IEMs, just because you do have to. There's more trade offs basically. Whereas with you know, multi PA and hybrid configurations, a lot of that stuff's been figured out like a lot better, a lot more easily. We'll do RCA to RCA since blowing it up is not recommended. Blowing it up is not recommended. I mean, yeah, ask, like, I don't know, send an email to Shit Audio and just ask them, because I am not familiar with the Lokius. I don't know what that is. Like, there are some headphones like where you can use, they have like a 4-pin balanced connector, but you can there's like an adapter that you can use that goes to like 1/4 inch and stuff like that. So I've come across that sometimes, but I know you don't want to be going the wrong way on that. So just be careful. Should I upgrade my Clear to the OG to the Utopia or buy D8K instead? Depends what you value. D8K, okay. I'm going to say if you're going to EQ, I think the D8K Pro actually is more technically impressive. If you're not going to EQ, I would just go with Utopia. But like, I would definitely put the Utopia over the D8K Pro for a number of qualities. Like, first of all, comfort, but second of all, that contrast quality. I think the Utopia does better, and it's a more balanced tuning overall. So that's why if you do EQ, yeah, the D8K Pro, sure, but I think that's really that's how I would answer that question. I'm trying to think what else though, like, because when you're talking about like $4,000, $4,500 headphones, you also have to consider the Odyssey LCD5. It's not, I mean, you could probably get a Susvara for around that price, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think you have to value other things for the D8K Pro to make sense. Sandara versus Edition XS, that's a video that's coming out on Monday. So the video's done. I just need to do a couple final little touches there, but that, yeah, I'll have that out on Monday. It's weird though, like the big thing with that is that people really don't like that headband, and there's no universe where I would take the Sandara headband over the Edition XS headband. Like I know it's like a cheap headband, but like, those Sandara and Ananda headbands are cursed. Like, the Aria headband is much better than those ones, but between the Aria headband and then the Edition XS headband, the comfort differences are insignificant. So, because you get cup swivel, right? Like, yeah. Do you think it could be a flat frequency response and just EQ the heck out of it? No. So there are some headphones that are kind of like that, like the Odyssey LCD2, for example. Like those Odysseys are the ones that they have great technical performance, but the tuning is something that they still have to figure out how to dial that in, which is, it's always a challenge, right? There's always trade-offs. But with those Odysseys, like, they really do shine with EQ, and many of them are kind of like that blank slate kind of platform that allows you to dial it in. The problem is that you need to know, you can't do it just based on a graph and matching to a target. Like, I see on, like, I don't know, there's people on ASR who are just giving their EQ profiles to perfectly match a target. And I've done ones like that in the past, and I don't like doing that because the target that's being used, which is typically Harman, is smooth to 1/3 or 1/2 octave. And I think that this really limits, what you're actually able to do with your EQ, because there are multiple different versions of that EQ that, when smoothed to the same degree as the target, you would end up with the same result. So that raises the question, well, what is the correct result for the EQ? And I think the answer is that you just don't know. So unless you do it by ear, you're never going to get the right result. And I'll do a video on the limits of EQ in a couple weeks, because, and I've done a big long post about this up on the Headphone community forum already. So if you're curious about that, it's actually a post in my headphone ranking list there. But for people who are like, oh yeah, he does EQ and he always recommends EQ. Okay, I do recommend EQ, but that's like to a point, right? I don't recommend using profiles, even if it's my profiles. Like, I don't recommend that as being like, oh, now you're done. That's like a starting point. Travis Sylvania, that's a great name. What's your take on 3.5 millimeter versus 4.4 millimeter for IEM or headphones? The new Mojo 2 is coming out, and a leaked picture shows only 3.5 millimeter. I don't think it matters. I think that you can order, if you're buying IEMs or headphones, you can typically, not in all cases, but in many cases, especially with IEMs, you can order them with different terminations. But as like functionally, the only benefit to 4.4 is, for the balance there, right? That's what you're asking about, balance, right? The only real benefit there with the balanced is that you could theoretically get more power out of that. And the 4.4 is actually a more preferable connector than 2.5 millimeter, because 4.4 is not going to snap. At the same time, I also do know that the 4.4 millimeter stuff is a little bit more expensive to produce. So that might raise the price. I don't know. I don't really have any opinion on that. I don't think it matters that if it's true that the Mojo 2 only has 3.5 millimeter. I think more so than it not having 4.4. The downside is that if that's the case, you can't. There's no balanced option, and so for anybody who has IEMs or headphones with a balanced cable, you wouldn't be able to use a balanced output there. But I haven't seen pictures of that, so I can't confirm. Maybe it'll be balanced, maybe it won't be. But yeah, as far as like the tangible benefits to single-ended versus balanced, it's power. Balanced is going to give you more power. You can go from balanced to single-ended, but not the other way. Yeah, you don't want to go. Yeah, exactly. But even then, like you say, you can go balanced to single-ended. I've encountered situations where you don't want to do that. So, yeah. Let's see. I wonder if there are a stationary preamp thing to do the same parametric EQ as the Q-Delix 5K and the library it has. Just use equalizer APO. If you're gonna if you're with your computer, right? Equalizer APO is the way for that. If you're on Windows, at least. I don't know about Mac. But yeah, a device that could do that would be nice. Where there's some software that's built in. I think that's something somebody needs to develop, where it's like a desktop device, like a DAC amp combo, or just a DAC even, where part of the use for it is software or an app or something like that gives you full parametric EQ, like equalizer APO with the PCUI built in, that you can use to completely affect all of the outputs, basically, the way that you can with equalizer APO. That as much as like you could do it for free with equalizer APO, and you should probably do it for free, there are a lot of people who don't like. Learning how to use equalizer APO is a major barrier, and they're not going to do it, and they're never going to do it. And fiddling with somewhat clunky software is not, that's too much. So I do think there's room for a device like that. Yeah, that would be good. That does a more elegant way of providing that. And I know Runes is much more elegant, but the problem with Rune is that it doesn't affect the entire output. It just affects what you're playing with Rune. So yeah, and the RME is different though. The RME is it's the all the adjustment happens on the device. I'm talking about something where you actually get software as well. Mest OG used for $700 worth it in 2022. That's a good price for it. I'm not a fan of buying used IEMs though. I'll never recommend that. You don't know if somebody's run it through the wash. I went with Zeus over Sindara. Wait, so I got the Elegia personally. It's my favorite headphone, but if you could afford it, go for the Radiance. I would agree. I went with the yeah, going for the, if you can afford it, go for the Radiance. Yeah, I went with the Zeus over Sindara. I would always go for the Sindara over the Zeus, but I can understand why people go for the Zeus if they want that V-shaped kind of thing. But the tunings on those harmonic dynes, they're not good. Like they are for a particular type of sound signature, which is V-shaped, and some people like that, but I don't. I think there's like good ways of doing V-shaped and bad ways, and in most of those harmonic dyne cases, it's bad. The Zeus is the one that is like the best of that. So, what do focal? What focal do you recommend between Elegia? Oh, Elegia, Alex, I like HD 600 and Sindara. Alex, by far. The Elegia is a more flavored kind of sound signature, whereas the Sindara and the HD 600 are more referencey, and I think the Alex is also closer to referencey. Like, Elegia is very mid-forward, so I EQ that, and the issue with the Elegia is that depending on the coupling, you can lose a lot of the bass. People have that problem. I didn't have that problem as much, but people do. Was the equalizer held up earlier? This is the Qdelix 5K. Now it's not actually, it's more of like it's like a Bluetooth dongle DAC, right? It's not actually like the amp in here is not powerful. So this is more for IEMs than over-ear headphones. Well, depending on the over-ear headphones, I guess. Boom 3D is a program for Mac? Okay, that's, yeah. There needs to be like an equalizer APO, like a staple standard that people use on Mac, and I'm just not familiar with what they are. But yeah, it's worth looking into that. What pads are those on the? Okay, it's not an Elegia. It's a Lear, and it is the Utopia pads. Again, if I missed your question, feel free to ask it again. We'll go for another 30 minutes at least here. Are you planning on going to CanJam next month? No. The state of the world has made that not likely. Why most people cannot hear the difference between $500 and 1.5K DAPs in a blind test, and how do you justify it personally? DAPs or like, because DAPs, like, that's not. You're asking the wrong guy. I have used expensive DAPs before, and yeah, I do think that there's a difference, but that's not like to say that you can't get really good stuff at $500 either, right? I think, okay, the question about blind test is very interesting though, and it's one that I'm. Some of you guys know this already, but I'm having an ABX box made. So like it sounds fun to call it that, but like an ABX blind testing comparison device that allows me to effectively there is also going to be a random variable there, right? And so this is going to allow me to blind test amps and DACs and potentially DAPs if I hook them up with the right cables and stuff like that. I have one right now already, but the limitation there is it's not the latest version of that I'm working on with Blaine, and so we're working on a new version of that. And also, I don't have the right cables for it. So, for the one that I have right now, it's like that cable just doesn't exist in Canada. So, I'm figuring out a solution at the moment. What? Metal 571 says he just walks around with his Verite. What? All right, let's get some more spicy questions in the chat. That's really what these live streams are all about. All right. See a lot of interesting discussion going on here. Can IEMs survive a trip through the wash? Depends on the IEMs, but typically, what is it? Balanced armatures don't. There was one where like it was like a hybrid that this is like years ago that I accidentally put through the wash, and like some of the drivers died and some of them didn't. Maybe it was the dynamic drivers that died and the BAs were okay. I can't remember what it was, but no, generally that is a way to kill your IEMs. Should try the Austrian Audio High X65. I'm curious about that one. I know they released one that was like just a bizarre bonkers frequency response, but I didn't get a chance to evaluate that one. And then I think the next one they did was better. But yeah, that's people keep asking me about those. I want to try them out, but I have no access to them, right? So I'll need to maybe buy one or something like that. LX for me is hard brittle with the Jot. You know, so my I mentioned this in one of the other live streams, but my guilty pleasure, setup right now is the Lear with Utopia pads, which is very similar. It's just different pads to the LX, off of the Amps and Sound Kenzie out of the 32 ohm out. So it does kind of it tilts things a little bit, and it does give more like a warmer presentation overall. So that might be something to do. I mean, it's an expensive tube amplifier, but it's such a good combo. Talking about the Zeus, heard the Dakoni fenestrated sheepskin pads improve most technical qualities. Interesting. Oh, for Bayer Dynamics? I haven't tried any Bayers with the Dakoni pads, so I just hope they fix those treble peaks on like the DT1990 and stuff like that. That treble peak is nuts. Looking handsome today, Uwu. What is Uwu? I see that sometimes. Thoughts on adding a tube preamp like the shit Freya, or adding a tube headphone amp? They had preouts. I know some people do that, but I've never done that. I've never found because like I don't know, maybe this is the way my brain works, but if I think like, okay, I'm gonna listen to something off of a tube amp, I want it to be tubey. I don't want it to be like indistinguishable with just like the tiniest little flavor of tube character. But some people might, and I think that's also a reason why people get those hybrids. But for me, if I'm like I want a tube kind of sound, I'm in that mode. Something like the Amps and Sound amps are where I'm gonna go with that, like full tube basically. I just don't like EQs that ruin a program's exclusive mode to the DAC. I'm trying to think of. Do you mean like the way that ruin a program's exclusive mode to the DAC? You mean like if you're using like Wasapi and stuff like that? Like, yeah, I think I understand what you mean. So this is one where I think it's worth doing a blind test and seeing if you can actually hear the difference between the exclusive mode and the non-exclusive mode. If you can hear a difference, then that's going to matter. But if you can't hear a difference, then I'd say, who cares? I have the Ananda. Do you think the Aria is worth the upgrade, or should I get a clear? I would get a clear, because then you have the best of, you have dynamic driver and a planar, right? Good versions of both. And they both are, you're going to see, basically, this is the difference in between the good versions of each of these. The Ananda is detailed, spacious, good separation, and the Ananda is actually more neutral than the Aria. As much as the Aria is, and I was just recently doing this comparison, the Aria is definitely more, technically impressive. Like, it has better separation and control and all this stuff. Like, you can hear more depth to the music and everything. You can hear things, individual instrument lines more clearly. But it's not like the Ananda is not far behind. And so I think you're already getting that quality with the like to a certain degree with the Ananda, and you might as well complement that with the clear, which is it's a little more mid forward there with that 1.5K ish forwardness. But the benefit of the clear there, it's that it's got really good macro contrast and punch, and the Ananda, that's where the Ananda kind of lacks, right? So I would get the clear for sure. Oh, what's up, Senior C? Just realized I was using the wrong YouTube account. Okay. Spicy. Recommend me a Campfire Audio. Yeah, the Campfire Audio Andromeda 2020 is awesome. Well, the old one was good too, but yeah, CFA Andromeda. The Solaris I thought was technically quite good as well. I think the tuning is not. The tuning is a little more flavored, I guess, but it was still decent. The newer one I wasn't as keen on. It sort of screwed things up a little bit, but yeah, pretty easy to recommend the Andromeda 2020. I wrote a protest post on Headphone to complain about capitulation to. Oh, okay. I don't know. I like. So I don't get into the whole like political debate about that kind of stuff, but like, because I live in Canada, right? So like for us, most of us are vaccinated. I still haven't had my booster because like I don't know, like I was passed over for that, but no, I'm getting it next week. But no, I totally understand the vax mandates that for events and things like that. I like my personal views on that. It's like there's a lot of craziness going on south of the border, and we have that up here in Canada as well. But like it's like when people come out as like anti-vaxxers up here, it does them social harm, significant social harm. But yeah, like this is a audio channel, headphone channel, and like I don't that stuff. It doesn't intrude or influence. Obviously I have opinions and I have a position on all that stuff, but like it's not related to what we're doing here for audio. I haven't heard those Echo, I don't know how to say that, OH10 IEMs. Oh, are they IEMs? I know the brand Echo does IEMs, but I can't really answer that. How do you rank the fit of the Dunu Titan S compared to the Yume Midnight? And the FHE Eclipse. I thought so. I would rank the Titan S as the most comfortable out of those, but that's again for me. And the fit is like pretty subjective because everybody has different shapes to their ears. But it's quite small. I also think that the Aria has a really good fit as well. The Moondrop Aria does. It's like almost like a more snug fit to the sides of like that ear part, whereas the Titan S is just more perfect, I guess. So and it doesn't touch as significantly there. So yeah, for me, I would say the Titan S is the most comfortable. The Yume was reasonably comfortable, but that one is a more traditional kind of shell design. So it's nice, but yeah, and it's small as well. It's not on the large side like the Theaudio ones, right? But I do still find the Titan S to be more comfortable. But the Yume Midnight was also solid. I think if you're considering the Midnight, I think you should probably go for it because it's more expensive, obviously, than like more than twice the price of the Titan S. So if you're considering the Yume Midnight, I think it's worth it. Yeah. Spicy question. You ever try any spicy sauce? I love spicy sauce. It doesn't love me so much, but I love hot sauce. Favorite type of hot pepper? I like the Thai chili peppers. I like habanero. I like most hot things. Most spicy things. Doesn't having a single driver IM severely limit sound quality due to limitations of one driver doing all the work? This is my main reason for not buying a single dynamic driver IEM. No, like dynamic drivers and balanced armatures are very different in their design. If you're using balanced armatures, I can see reasons to go with multiple, BAs, and not all BAs are created equally either. So let me just caution you, that sound quality can't be determined by driver count, right? Whether you're looking at, 5 balanced armatures versus single dynamic versus 12 balanced armatures, you can't determine sound quality just by looking at the driver count and saying, this is better than this one because it has more drivers, for example. That does not work. So you really have to be paying attention to frequency response, and then also, just pay attention to what the subjective reports are from reviewers as well, right? Like, and don't, not just one person, right? Like, see what Crin says, see what Super says, about the technical capabilities there, and but then also, pay attention to frequency response, because that's going to matter a lot. And so no, I don't think that dynamic driver, like, you can get single dynamic driver IEMs that sound amazing, right? It's not, like, I'm just thinking there's listen to the Zen Pro, for example, if you get a chance, or the I'm trying to think what else. Like, there's that Sennheiser one that's a lot of people love. So yeah, I think the main reason why a lot of companies are pushing for single dynamic driver IEMs is because it is a bit of a frontier, because the development hasn't been perfectly figured out for those the way that it has to achieve the desired results, that the way that it has for multi-BAs, at least so I'm told. And then the other reason is that people like that natural presentation of the dynamic driver, the single dynamic driver, and then also that sort of like punch and physicality. Obviously, you can get that with a hybrid, dynamic driver in the bass, but people really want that sort of natural presentation that dynamic drivers provide, and so that's why I think there's a push for that. Rob, thank you. What do you think about the new HBB TripOwin $100 collab using the Oxygen driver? O2 is one of the best IEMs under 300. I haven't heard either of those, but the TripOwin is on my radar. Yeah. I mean, the Oxygen is as well. It's just hard to get my hands on that one. But the TripOwin, I'm interested in that one, again, because I like the collab stuff. So I'll see if I can get one of those in and give an evaluation at some point. Favorite headphones for Opeth? Ghost Reveries Watershed era. All right. It's like the good era. I would go with Planars. I would go with Odyssey LCD2F EQ'd. That would be my pick. Or Odyssey LCD XC with I have a heavy metal EQ for it. But again, don't just EQ with a profile. Like, you got to listen. All right, let's see. Even if the Elegia is a bit colorful, I was wondering if the Elegia had some sparkles. Some highs picking through. Actually, the treble presentation of the Elegia is quite nice. It's smooth. It's more that the whole thing is mid forward and the upper mids are recessed and the bass is recessed. So like your lower mids to upper mids or lower mids to mids, it's just forward. Best IEM under $1,000 in your opinion? The Theaudio Monarch Mark II. Is there any upcoming headphone / IEM manufacturers, like new ones? If so, name them. Like, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like up and coming? Like IEM and headphone manufacturers that are like not big names yet? It depends how, like, whether you consider Dunu to be a big name, but because they've been around for quite a while. But Dunu is one of them for IEMs, Moondrop as well, Theaudio. Those are sort of the up and coming ones. For headphones, there's nothing really from brands that have that are not well known that have surprised me. Like the stuff that I tend to think is like really good is like the stuff that, you know, is typically well established already. And I think it's like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult for, especially for over-ear headphone manufacturers, it's difficult to do that because it costs a lot. Like the barrier to entry for manufacturing headphones at scale is massive, as far as cost investment, or you know, just the amount of money that you need to put into that, to get the tooling up and running, but then also to make the you have to basically commit to a significant amount, and so you have to be really confident that what you've been able to develop is going to sell well, right? So you have to have some sort of financial backing to do that. So it's tricky to do. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's really come out that surprised me, that's like a new manufacturer. I really just see it in the IEM space more than anything else. Like Kiwi ears, right? That's. I mean, I know who tuned it, but like, and you know, yeah, it's the same person who tuned some of the stuff for the audio. So, but yeah, like, yeah, Kiwi ears was one that, you know, surprised me, and a lot of that is just like the different brands from manufacturers that are, you know, the same people. So it's not exactly that surprising. I'm trying to think what else. There's obviously like the emerging, like somewhat lesser known brands, like, you know, ZMF, and Zach's seen quite a bit of success in the audiophile space, for good reason. And then also, you know, the planar side is the DCA, Dan Clark Audio, and, you know, they've done you know, the more portable or like the more lightweight, comfortable planars. So yeah, I mean, they do exist, I suppose. It's just it's harder to compete with the really well established ones, like, you know, Sennheiser and Focal and Hi-Fi Man and Odyssey, you know, for that, because they're already set up to do it. What's next? Why go in for real politics? There are more pressing questions in hiding audio, like, do cables matter? Of course they matter. How else are you going to connect your headphones to your amp? That's I think Crin did a funny video on that. And but yeah, I think cables matter for you know, like ergonomic and aesthetic reasons, but I don't think they're meaningful for sound quality reasons, unless there's some specific filter or something like that going on that you're deliberately messing with. To clarify my comments about single dynamics not being able to compete with multiple, I'm not talking about more is better, but just pure physics of one driver playing 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. So like, you're talking about the whole range. But if you look at even the Titan S's frequency response, that's the whole frequency range. Like, you have perfectly well extended bass all the way down to the limits of human hearing, and you have perfectly well extended treble all the way up to 20 kilohertz. So this is, again, you can do anything with a single dynamic. You can, you know, you can even tune it to be exactly what you want it to be. The question is, where are the trade-offs when you do that? So I think that's a lot of it, is like, how can we implement this in ways where we can get the tuning to be what we want it to be without incurring some of those trade-offs as far as, you know, technical qualities is concerned. But no, like, there's no limitation from a physics perspective for how low or high, like, as far as the range of human hearing is concerned, there's no, you know, meaningful limitation there with one driver, with like dynamic driver technology, right? You can, of course you can do, you know, all the way up to 20 kilohertz, as even in cheap, you know, $80 IEMs like these ones that we're talking about. So we need M9 versus SA6. Yeah, that would be a good comparison. I don't know, like, I like the M9, but I like the SA6 tuning better. The M9 is more detailed, but it's also more like, it's like they both do a good job of that sort of like shifted ear gain thing to not be as fatiguing in the upper mids, right? Which I like. But I like the way that the SA6's lower registers are a little better, and then but I think the M9's got better, more extended treble. I should double check that. I'm not sure, but subjectively, it felt like it had a more, I don't know, clear treble presentation. Oh, head audio. Thank you. Yes, that's a great emergent. I'm curious to see what they do next, if they're able to do, a more lightweight version of the headphone. I'd love to see that. But yeah, that's a good example. Other ones like RAL, people love the SR1A. I can understand why. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, there's the Rawson audio stuff with the custom color cups. But, those folks they're craftsmen, right? So a lot of it is like just like with ZMF as well. There's that sort of customization option there, and that's really the main reason to get into those. Hold on a second. If I like the DCA Noir, what kilobuck IEM do you recommend? Symphonium Helios. If you can handle the fit of the Symphonium Helios, I think that's probably still the top dog, if not one of the top dogs, for technical performance and that kind of tuning. Because it's one of those where it's like, again, very distinct frequency ranges. Like it has a bass boost, but it's all in the sub bass, and the treble's really nice on it. Other than that, the Audio Monarch Mark II. All right, let's see. Come on, more spicy stuff, guys. ER2 is a dark treble, shouty upper mid, grainy IEM, and I'll take the Titan S or Aria instead every time. Oh God, you're gonna make somebody really upset. Probably enough that they're gonna have to make another ridiculous video. People are nuts about their gear. They love it so much that they feel the need to troll everybody else. My issues with the Etymotics is less to do with. So I should think about how to phrase this. The biggest issue with those Etymotics are. You're talking about the Etymotic, right? The biggest issue is the fit and the violating insertion style of fit. I just can't deal with that. And I think there's probably ways of making it so that it's not as shouty, depending on whether you're using like triple flange or double flange or whatever else, right? And I've tried multiple different, I've tried all the different recommendations, and it never sounds right to me. So I think, for the same reason that I find most IEMs to be shouty, I think that's probably why I have issues with those as well. But it's not like there isn't good thinking behind that, though. It's just that it doesn't seem to work for my ear canal. Super review star. That's a lot of stars. 5 stars. Or are you saying for the Titan S? What speaker company makes nice headphones? Head is another example. Focal. Sennheiser makes some Wait, does Sennheiser make speakers? Maybe not. This shows how much I know about Sennheiser. They're not known for that, though. I think, like Head, like you're talking like high-end speaker company. Focal would be the one to focus on, and Head, yeah. Is Moondrop Illumination the only IEM? Oh, that's another good example there of single dynamic driver IEM with a great tuning. Yeah, it's like a 650 in IEM form. It's just, I think it's overpriced. It was definitely overpriced. And I think they could have done better with the technical performance. It's not that technically impressive. I actually think that the Dunu Zen Pro is better. Like I would take the Dunu Zen Pro over the Illumination. But I will say the Illumination has very good treble balance. Like it's very well balanced for the tuning. Kato is similar to Illumination for a lot less. Actually, I still think the Illumination's... well, okay, yeah. I mean, so I actually do have the Kato, so that is another one that I'll be doing an evaluation of soon. Or like, a video or live stream on soon. But yes, the Kato is excellent, but I still think the Illumination's treble and timbre are better. But the Illumination is overpriced. I don't think there's any two ways about it. Especially given how close some of those other ones get. How is the resolving capability of Legia compared to the Sundara and HD600? You're comparing closed back to open back, and it's not really fair. But I'm going to say the Sundara, at least the Sundara, is definitely better. HD600, yeah, that... The Legia's got a more technically impressive driver, but it's... I'm going to say probably better on the Legia for certain things, for technical capabilities. Certainly the excursive quality is more impactful, it's more punchy, even though the base level isn't very high on the Legia and sometimes drops out depending on the coupling. But, the HD, and where the HD600 just sort of rolls off, right? Because it's open back. But the HD600, I think, has the much better tonal balance. I don't think there's any debate about that. And so that's why I say you're comparing closed against open. It's not really that fair. In some ways, I would say that the closer comparison would be the Celesti against the HD600, because that is the more referencey, normal kind of sound. And then the Radiance is against the 650, something like that. But in both cases, I would take either of the Focals. I think they're more technically impressive, yeah. But Sundara, the Sundara is absolutely more resolving than the Elegia. Illumination beats the hell out of the Blessing 2 in terms of natural presentation, cohesiveness, dynamics, and tuning. I would say yes, except for dynamics. That was the one thing I was like, it's not that great. And I think they just took a different approach to that one. I'd actually say that the Blessing 2 is, I don't know, the tuning of the Blessing 2 is pretty darn good as well. But I completely agree as far as natural timbre and that sort of cohesiveness quality. Yes, I do agree. You guys asked me about the Mest. I only evaluated the original Mest, and it's pretty good, yeah. But I still think I would probably... I mean, the detail in the Mest was pretty darn good. It's just that the tuning was a bit too intense at 6K in the treble for me, and it was a bit U-shaped, I think. That's how I describe it. But it was very, very impressive for detail. Oh, the pads were intended to be for bare dynamic. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Right, they paired well with Zeus. Okay, that's interesting. I need to do more pad swaps with those. I think the Zeus is a very interesting platform that I want to test more stuff with. But I really do like those pads. They're right in front of me here. They're very comfortable. So, yeah. Spiciest thing you've eaten? Probably... I've had this Thai dish called papaya salad, which is the Thai term for it is samtam, and it doesn't look like it would be that spicy, and I just put like a whole bunch on my plate. I was like, oh yeah, this looks really good, and it was the spiciest thing. I was dying. Actually, that's not true. It's not the spiciest thing I've ever eaten. Because you can make it in like more spicy or less spicy ways, but this one was done for like actually for Thai people who are used to the spiciness, and so it kind of surprised me more than anything. But the spiciest thing I ever ate is definitely something. There's a wing place where I live called Wings, original name, and they do something called the Bobby Wing, and basically. It's like something where, like, if you're going to order it, you have like a waiver that you sign that like says you're not going to sue them. And I thought to myself, oh, how spicy can it be? So I ordered like a plate, and there was like a group of us, and I was thinking, yeah, I mean, we're each going to have some of the super spicy wings, right? And most people couldn't get through a single one of them. It was all I could do to get through. Like I had one, and I was like, I'm not eating another one of those things, because it's that kind of spiciness where it doesn't go away, and you're sitting there, and over the course of like 15 minutes, it's just getting more and more spicy, and you're like, it doesn't stop. So like if you're watching like Hot Ones, like that YouTube show, which is I think it's called First We Feast, but yeah, the Hot Ones segment there. They have that one that's called the Bomb, and I don't think that what I had was like that type of thing. But it was like of that level of spiciness, right? That it caused that same kind of reaction. Like whether I'm not sure if it's like ghost pepper or whatever that they're using for that. Something that's like, genetically engineered for ridiculous spiciness. Yeah, I'd love to do Hot Ones, but it would do terrible things to my body. It's like, yeah, like I said, I love spicy food and I can handle it, but it does not do nice things to me. Hi Andrew, thank you, Arun. I have a Sundara and I can't decide between the LCD-X and the Aria for an open back. I listen to jazz, classical, metal. That's like everything. All right, so you have a Sundara. All right. I'm going to say LCD-X 2021. As much as I do think the Aria is more detailed, it is also neutral bright and more suited for specifically one type of music, which I think is like jazz and classical and that type of stuff. I definitely would not use the Aria for metal, probably not for hip hop or neo soul either. So LCD-X 2021. I couldn't deal with the fit either on the Etymotics, but I forced myself to use them because I couldn't return them. Nah, I love the fit. Yeah, it's probably one of those big barriers to entry, significant barriers to entry. Michael DeLazar, thank you. Let me know if you have I don't see a question, but Michael, I'm gonna tell everybody, go check out Michael's channel. He does headphone reviews as well, and they are good. Let's see. Michael, we should do some sort of collab sometime if you're still there. Yeah, Sennheiser are microphones. They do like pro audio stuff, but they're more microphones and headphones. I don't know about any Sennheiser speakers. As I was saying, like for speaker companies that do headphones, the recognized like high-end speaker companies, that's like Focal and Head Audio as well. And there are others too. There's like, there's lots of that sort of thing going on. But I think the best example would be Focal, yeah. I can wear Eddies just fine and insert them all the way. They just don't sound that great. But there's no arguing with the isolation. I guess that's true. The Eddie Musician earplugs, interesting. Klipsch makes speakers and headphones, yeah. Yeah. I think Koss technically is another company that does as well. Koss Porta Pros. And they did make speakers a long time ago, but I don't know what their speakers are. Like I'm not familiar with that all that much. But I'm getting more into speakers these days because I'll have a review in the next like month or so or a couple months maybe, of the Head 07s, which are ridiculous speakers that like they're near field speakers. And they kind of have changed the game as far as speakers is concerned for me, like listening to them, just because I didn't think speakers could do that. Like I didn't think they would be that detailed, because normally I listen to speakers and they're not that detailed, and I prefer headphones because you can actually, you can analyze the music in a more critical manner. But with those ones, it's a different experience. So there's those, and then I also want to get some Genelecs in at some point as well, and compare the two. How do you know it's 6K from songs? Which instrument or song would you recommend me to try? Whether there's a 6K peak? It shows up in, it's not specific songs, but it shows up in all music in general. But a good way to test for this is listen to music with vocals. And if there's because a lot of this depends on how things are recorded and mixed and mastered and stuff like that. So listen to a lot of different music with vocals in it, like, jazz with vocals and stuff like that. If there's an emphasis to the sh sounds, that's usually lower treble. If it's a s sound that's emphasized, that's usually mid treble to upper treble. And then if it's like this sort of shimmery sheen thing, that's usually the upper treble. I hope that helps. Favorite tube amp aside from amps and sound? The Felix Audio Euphoria is very interesting, but I think that's a very specific pairing type of thing that you need to use those higher impedance dynamic driver headphones with. That would be, yeah. I need to try some of the Donald North stuff, though. I've heard good things about that. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I've heard other tube amps, and nothing really impressed me as much as the Amps and Sound ones. Like, they sound the most tubey and don't change the frequency response all that much. Like, I tried the Aurus Audio Euterpe and some of the other stuff, and I found it just rolled the frequency response a little too much. It still had it gave it interesting tube character, but like, I liked that with the Amps and Sound stuff, you don't lose the bass and the treble, right? I had wings like that in Philly with their hottest sauce, and I recoiled hard upon getting just a little whiff of them. Hurts the nose. Yeah. All right. More spicy questions here. We'll go for a couple more minutes here. The spicier, the more we'll talk about it. The more spicy, yeah. Carolina Reaper, yeah. That stuff is just like ridiculous. Trinidad Scorpion, Scotch Bonnet, yeah. Yeah, I think there is that specially modified Carolina Reaper that is like the most ridiculous one. Yeah, Foster. That's another good one. Yeah. Solo 6BEs, that was the other, yeah, the Solo 6BEs were the ones where so my boss actually had them on his desk because I think I'm not sure if he was just like evaluating them, but he had them, he was borrowing them. I don't think he actually owned them. And he had them on his desk there, and yeah, I remember, like, this was like a long time ago when I like walked in and he was listening to music. I was like, what the hell is that? Because that is so much more detailed than I ever thought, like near field speakers could be. And I was like, what? Like, this is ridiculous. And yeah, and then I learned about the price. Like, okay. So even before I knew about the price of those, I was like, wow, that's something special. So yeah, I'd love to get a pair of Solo 6BEs in at some point as well, and do that comparison. But right now, the heads they do that same kind of thing, but they're larger, right? I think the heads are a bit bigger than the Solo 6BEs. So maybe it's like, okay, I expected it to be able to do that, but with the Solo 6, they're not large; they're small. So very impressive, and that's also why I'm interested in those Genelecs, because they're not huge. I don't care about the big floor standing stuff. I mean, it's just me, but yeah. Will you review? I mean, I should say it's when they're good, and I'm in a good room, and there's the floor standing stuff, and it's impressive. But that's never a scenario for me where I'm actually in. I'm not, I listen at my desk, and sometimes in the living room, but the space is not so large that you couldn't get away with the near field setup there either, right? Or actually, those heads, they're way too loud even for that space. Will you review the Amps and Sound Mogwai / Forge or Ferrum Ore? Yeah. So the only reason why I haven't reviewed the Forge is because Tarrant won't let me take it from his desk. I've listened to it. I've hooked it up. I've had it in the studio a little bit, and then Tarrant took it back and won't let me. That won't leave his desk. So it's because it's his favorite. The Ferrum Ore is the same thing. I do want to evaluate that, and as soon as we get that ABX comparison box in, that's one of the ones I'm going to be doing. I'll be comparing it to other. I mean, the biggest thing with those is that there's the question of whether or not there's a difference between the higher end, solid state amps and a discernible difference in blind test or blind listening, right? Between the solid state amplifier, high end solid state amplifiers, and like the good enough, like the cheap ones, but that measure well, like the shit Magni 3 Plus and stuff like that, and then also some of the topping stuff as well, because that always measures well. So It'll be interesting to because the nice thing about that, right, is I can do a video with the ABX box where I just show what's actually going on, and then if I get it right, I can kind of prove, I can demonstrate that, right? But if I get it wrong, then that also is interesting of in and of itself. It shows that the more expensive stuff isn't necessarily discernible in a blind listening test. So for me, it's like both results are interesting and worth publishing. And they do something to they indicate something meaningful about the way that we use the way that we experience things and perception in general, I think. Because it's like, yeah, if it turns out that there's no difference in a blind listening test with the use of this ABX comparison device, I think people could potentially goalpost shift on that by saying that there's something in the box that's affecting the sound, and so it's summing it or whatever. But like, I'll show the schematic of what's actually going on in the box, because I've asked for it to be, so it's basically just like having cables, right? And that's the only difference. Cables that go through switches, right? So that you can switch it from one to the other. And so there might still be some goalpost shifting on that, but I think that ideally that should reveal the difference if there is one. And yeah, so the ferrum ore is also of that. Going to be for that comparison. What brand would you choose for a Resolve collab? As I mentioned, Dunu would be high on that list. I would love to do an Odyssey collab. Like I would do a Resolve's tuning of an LCD2F, for example, something like that. Or else, even LCD5, right? That'd be awesome. Yeah, I would do Odyssey would be like either number 1 or number 2 for me for some sort of collab. Another one would be ZMF, mainly because I think Zach is one of the nicest people, and I would have so much fun working with him, to do a collab of some kind. But I don't know how, that's more of like a dream collab than a tangibly realistic collab. If he's watching, hit me up. We'll do something together. But Zach's the craftsman there on his own. There's no reason for him to. He doesn't need me, right? And that's the thing. It's like, as much as I would love to do headphone collabs, and I'm actively looking for opportunities to do this. There are so many. Like, it's not just a matter of saying, yes, we would want to do it, because like, who the hell am I to say that my tuning here is better than the person who made it, right? I might have a preference, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily know more about developing headphones than that other person, right, or the engineer, right? So there is definitely an element of like if I went to Odyssey and said, hey, let's do a collab, there probably is an element of like, well, why should we care what? You know what I mean? There has to be some sort of reasoning behind it, and I think that reasoning would be like, well, you can. It would probably have more to do with the economics of the whole thing, rather than any agreement as far as my tuning preferences would be concerned. But yeah, I would say Dunu, Odyssey, and ZMF would be my picks for that. Sennheiser obviously would be a ton of fun to collab with. Focal would be fun to collab with. Because I'm thinking of like brands that make stuff that I already really like, that I would have just very minor, make very minor changes to here and there. Like with Odyssey, it's making the tuning a little bit more, neutral, right? That's sort of what I would do with those. And I think that's funny because like I've talked to some of the folks at Odyssey about this, and not about collabs, but about like their tunings and stuff like that, and they do go after. They're trying to achieve neutral reference sound from speakers. I think for recording studios, I think that's kind of how they're aiming their tonal balance. But in my view, I think that, as far as like everybody who's evaluating Odyssey headphones, typically they find that it doesn't actually match what our collective understanding of neutral would be for over-ear headphones. The newer ones are like the 2021 LCD X, for example. It's much closer, so at least there's that. But yeah, I do think that like that's like the key thing is like dialing in the tuning a little bit with Odyssey would be, all that's really necessary there, because the technical performance there is already insane. With Hi-Fi Man, it's improving the build quality, maybe having better cables. With and with Sennheiser, it's like, okay, I would do like a retune of the HD 800S, and all it would do is like, just take down that 6K a little bit, and then fill in the, like, what is it, like the 2K region a little bit, 1.5K a little bit. I mean, it might not be as spacious, because that's maybe it's the conjunction of those two elements that make it spacious, but that's what I would do. Tell Taryn that you are the star. What does he think he is? Taryn does everything. He's the one who makes everything happen. Keeping Taryn happy is a priority. No, literally, the guy he works like all the time, and he's just always making things happen. What car do you own? I own a 2008 Honda Fit. If anybody wants to buy my 2008 Honda Fit, hit me up, because I would like to sell it, because I would like to. I need a new car. Not an expensive car, but you're asking metal. Yeah, I was talking to him earlier about this. I'm into cars now. No, I just want a cheap, like whatever a basic working car is that, well, either has better sound quality, like better audio in it, or I could modify to have better audio in it. Let's see. Stock pads? I'm not sure what you mean. Let's see. What's your favorite single dynamic driver IEM? Probably the Zen Pro. Right now. Although I need to listen to that IE 900. That's apparently quite good. Which headphone reviewer is the scariest in person? Just trying to think of the ones who I've actually met. Or do you mean like when you're just like interacting with them, like not publicly? Because so scariest in person, probably max settings, only because he is freakishly tall. That dude is like this is a 7-foot linguini. But that's, with that said, I've never met Zeos, for example, and I've never met, there's a lot of other reviewers out there who I've never met. Oh, Super's here. What's up, man? I have to go shovel snow once this stream ends, so keep going. Where's your squig site? Yeah, working on it, man. It's a process. It's going to be Headphone Database, I think, right now. Although I haven't. That site was down when I checked last time, so I'll need to talk to Sup again and make sure that we still have that on track, because we hashed out how it's going to look and how it's going to be integrated and all that stuff. But I need to take like at least a week to just curate all of the data and then put it all out there. And it's just that there's so many other things that show up that take my attention away from that. So I think what you're hearing in the Blessing 2 is more of the sub-bass boost rather than the actual dynamics. I never said it was that dynamic. The overall physicality of the illumination is bizarre for an IEM, in my opinion. No. So I just don't think that okay. I don't think that the illumination is particularly punchy and impactful. That's my only, or like technically impressive in the bass, let's say. It has nothing to do with level. And I don't think the Blessing 2 is particularly great there either. It's just that I wouldn't put the illumination ahead of that. But if you hear it that way, then solid. That's awesome. My bet is people who are more extroverted, like, and sorry, just to be clear, like, I do think the illumination is a great sounding IEM. I just think, these days it's not the most value laden IEM. Let's see. My bet is people who are more extroverted like speakers and people who are more introverted and antisocial like headphones. Yeah, but also it depends. I mean, I probably, but it also depends on the like your potential listening environment. Like if you have a house and a space for speakers, I don't like that makes sense, right? But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely my music tastes are a little bit more like weird, I guess. Like they're more esoteric. I like jazz, and not everybody likes jazz, so I don't want to inflict my jazz on everybody I'm around. And I like classical, acoustic. I like music with instruments. I like metal. And even within those genres, my tastes are a little bit more on the esoteric side as well. So there's definitely an element of like I don't want to impose my ivory tower music choices on people who would rather not listen to that. But you're probably right about that. Who would make a better Sith Lord, Metal 571 or Critical? Critical. Metal is very much a Jedi Master. Should we expect many reviews in 2022 from everyone at the Headphone Show? You, Chrono, the emo guy, and the IEM guy. Oh, Precook Vision, the IEM guy. Yeah. Should we expect many reviews in 2022? Yes. Expect reviews in 2022. I am gearing up though to do a little bit more educational content. That's a weird thing to say, but more educational videos. Like the next one I have coming up that I'm working on for next week. So I have the Edition XS video coming out on Monday, if everything goes to plan. But then, the next one after that is going to be the that I do at least is going to be the video on the different stages of reading measurements, headphone measurements. And then after that, I'm going to do one on the limits of EQ. And so that kind of stuff, right? It's not as like, I guess catchy as product reviews, but it's the kind of stuff that I need to make it because then I can reference it, right? I can say, here's the canonical opinion on whatever it is, right? And you can put it in descriptions. Yeah, Metal's not evil enough to be a Sith Lord. And I don't think Chronicle is either, but he's definitely more dark side amenable. All right, last couple here. Resolve and Mark Ryan are most worthy for a collaboration. I would like to collab with Super. I'd love that. Oh, do you mean like with different brands? I would love to see it. Yeah, I would like a Super review with the brand as well. Yeah, Super review collab. I actually think that Super and I have different enough ear canals where, the IEMs that will be shoutier for me will probably not be as shouty for him. I have a sense. That's my expectation. Get a Porsche. What, do you think I'm made of money? I can barely afford to live in Vancouver where I do. Vancouver's an expensive city to live in. No, I'm just looking for like a, basic, reliable, decent car that isn't, 10 years old or 20 years old or what am I at now? yeah, it's almost like 15 years old. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's a couple of issues with like my car like drives fine, like it gets up to speed fine, the engine works and all that stuff, but like there's all the like peripheral things that seem to like go. It's only got about 165,000 k, but yeah, like for example, I keep having to like replace things, and it starts to get more expensive per month than it would be if I just bought a I don't know, Toyota Corolla or something like that, like a modern one. But no, I don't think there's any hope of me being able to buy a nice fancy car like a Porsche or something like that. I'm looking for extra regular here, guys. I'm looking for like the HD6XX of or like the Sandara of of automobiles. What headphones are you using right now? Oh, these are the Focal Elir with Utopia pads. Do you have a jazz playlist or any playlist with your faves? I really like your jazz picks and some of your videos. So that's actually I'm gonna try and do this. I don't know if it's how it's gonna land, but I'm gonna try and start doing like album reviews that are like audiophile approved albums, I guess. Because yeah, music is fun. And then maybe talk about some headphones that make it sound special or something like that. But yeah, I do actually have a playlist of test tracks that I use. Not a playlist on Spotify or anything, but like I have a list of recommended songs to test with headphones with, and it's up on the Headphone Community Forum. You can just search for it there. And a lot of it is jazz, yeah. Are you going? Oh, somebody says they are going to Can Jam this year. What can you expect? Just try headphones, DACs, amps, other stuff. I don't think you can get much sense of DACs and amps from trade shows, but people do still try, unless you're using closebacks, in which case, yeah, you have a better chance there. I don't know how this one's going to be in New York. Honestly, because of what's going on with the world, I have no idea if how that's going to be. But in 2020, it was fantastic. It's a great experience. Expect to have more fun talking to people than you will actually getting impressions of things. I have not heard the Chord Cutest and M Scaler. I've heard of them. I've seen them, but I haven't spent any time with them to evaluate. Son Goku, thank you. Do you get any help with your video reviews? How many people are involved in editing, etc.? Does your GF help? Can't wait for amps. Compare. Love your stuff. So right now, it's for my videos. It's just me who does the the filming, the editing, all that stuff, thumbnails, etc. And for each of the other reviewers that you see, like Chrono and Precog as well, they do their own videos as well. They do all their own editing and filming and all that stuff. I've been thinking about getting an editor for mine, just because, or like for all of them, because man, is it ever like time consuming to do that stuff. Like I filmed the Edition XS video on Tuesday, and I was working until 8 o'clock last night to try and get that edit finished, and it's not particularly well edited either. It's just to make it coherent. So yeah, it definitely is time consuming. So I'm considering it. Get a Mazda CX-5. I'm considering a Mazda CX-30 actually. Right now that's the kind of thing I'm looking at, because I like the hatchback element. Mazda CX-5 seems too big. Are Chord products overpriced? Trying to understand why their stuff seems overpriced. Yeah, because they think they're the best. And when anything is like somewhat like more expensive than the competition, and it's not. I mean, what's the competition, right? But if anything's like somewhat more expensive, given the type of device that it is, it's usually because the manufacturer thinks that they're better, their thing is better than everybody else's, and it might be, right? Like I haven't spent enough time doing evaluations with those. I'm just saying that's a plausible reason, as to why. Build is pretty good on those. I'll give them that too, from the ones that I have physically used, but and they all typically sound good. Like I've heard some that sound very detailed and good. So there's that. But with Chord, the main thing is that they're doing something different as far as they're doing custom DAC stuff, right? So they're not doing the off-the-shelf DAC chips. So maybe that's licensed to charge more. I don't know. The new Honda Civics are really nice, and I want one, but it's more expensive. It's like, I could get a Honda Civic 2022, but that's like 30 grand here in Canada, and the CX-30s aren't even as expensive as that. So anyways, now we're talking about cars. I probably won't be able to get a car for like, until the fall or something like that. So I'll reevaluate what the prices are like then. If you can get a new car with EQ the sound system, of course. Okay. I think that's going to be it for the live stream, guys. Thanks to everybody for hanging out, and thank you all for your questions. Next time we do a live stream, it might be next week. If we do, have more spicy questions prepared. I want these streams to be the things that don't get talked about in reviews because they're too time consuming, right? And they require more context. We can talk about them in these formats. The straight pipes, good Canadian YouTube car reviews. Oh, okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thanks for the tip there. But yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in. And yeah, as I mentioned, we'll have more videos coming out in the near future. Monday and Tuesday should be 2 new videos. As I mentioned, Monday is the Edition XS from Hi-Fi Man, and then Tuesday is likely the Axel Grell IEM from the review's being done by Precog Vision there. But I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good weekend.